end. Awesome. If for whatever reason this green light goes off, just swap it with this guy. All right, thank you.
No problem.
Sweet. Let me get this guy back up, but it is 6:45, and we're going to get started. So yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. Another monthly Node Meetup. Today we have a pretty exciting topic and speaker. I am, speaking. So very exciting, very epic, whatever. And then, you are here at Node Indy. Let me go through some housekeeping type stuff. We're always looking for speakers, so if you have a topic, whatever the topic that is related to, JavaScript, Node, or really, doing anything related to those programming languages, you can really justify a whole range of topics. So just message us on Meetup. That's the best way to get into contact. And the best way that you can know a topic is by giving a presentation on it. Cool. So we have 4 meeting formats normally. We have the lecture that you're attending tonight about some specialized topic. We have lightning talks, so if you want to, get practice doing a 10 to 20 minute talk on something, then that might be where you want to give your presentation. Those are always fun. I like doing those because, you can just learn a whatever topic that has been on your to-do list for a while. NodeBots. So we've 3D printed and created some robots that work with our, Node bots, the Johnny 5 framework. So we typically have like a little mini challenge. You get to program a robot to do something. We haven't had one of those in a little bit, so we're probably gonna have another one coming up. So look out for that. Those are always fun. And then case studies where a company will talk about how they use some Node-related technology to solve a problem or accomplish a task. And and I think actually Steve was talking about giving one of the case studies. So you can also put that in your forecast. I run NodeBots. I don't know. I just put the slide in because I could definitely come. Those are fun. It's cool. And then so thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to have Node Indy, Angie's List for the space, Blackboard for the pizza. And in fact, if you said that you wanted to speak on behalf of Blackboard.
We are always looking for great engineers at Blackboard. So
we
have a lot of roles open and some really interesting projects going on. So if you want to hear about it, I'm happy to talk.
Any juniors?
Just come. Okay. Yeah, we hire all of us.
Okay.
Nice. And your stack is mostly like Angular, TypeScript, a little bit Java. So
and it's moving towards React, and we do a lot of different things.
Okay, cool. Nice. So, at the end of the talk, reach out to this guy if you want to hear more about Blackboard recruiting opportunities. Nice. So that brings us. Wait, do you have one?
Yes. Question.
Sure.
Wi-Fi. Are we able to get on?
Yeah. So the Wi-Fi is list lover, and then you should be able to connect. And there's AL public, right? That work for you?
I felt dirty doing it.
I have AL.
Yeah, that, like a rainbow table could easily crack that one, but whatever. And also just like basic,
Oh, that's the. Oh, I gotcha. Cool. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, if you brought your laptop, I definitely encourage you to clone my repo, start if you think it's cool, and then run the application that I'm going to show you guys. All right, cool. That concludes our housekeeping related stuff. So here's the topic and what you are here for, hopefully. Phaser, Webpack, and TypeScript. So something that I've been putting together over the course of many weeks, many months, is a HTML5 video game, and I've used a couple different technology choices to make that happen. So I'm using Webpack as my primary build system. I utilize TypeScript, and I chose Phaser as the HTML5 framework. I'll talk more about these in a second, really. But yeah, so let's just get into it. Agenda, we're gonna talk about why I chose the technology choices. We're gonna go over some of the aspects of creating assets for a video game. We're gonna jump into the code for a little bit. We're definitely gonna show it on the internet, and I'll describe my stack and why I think it's a really good choice of libraries and frameworks to build a basic 2D game. Cool. So why TypeScript? In my opinion, it allows for a lot more guarantees about your code quality before you hit runtime. It's always nice to catch bugs and issues as quickly as possible. So like the feedback cycle needs to be almost instantaneous. And there are other properties that you can get whenever you have either inferred types or just really static types on your code that makes changing things a lot safer. And also it allows you to stop, take a break, think about like what your program is actually doing, and then build the program around that deconstructive thought process. So this is actually a recent trend because I learned about the Curry-Howard correspondence. There's many videos on YouTube out there, but because I've been exposed to a lot of functional programming and a lot of untyped and typed systems, I've just been formulating this opinion. But the Curry-Howard correspondence kind of can be boiled down to a simple basic axiom, which is your type description is, hey, how's it going? Nice. We're getting into it. Okay, so yeah, it can be boiled down to a very basic axiom. Types are a theorem, equivalent to a mathematical theorem, and then your program is just proof for that theorem, which kind of flips on its head how you think about types. And I don't know, it's cool. I think there's a lot there, so I'm currently exploring that. Nice. Phaser's written in TypeScript, so that's a big win. Whenever something already has native type definitions for it, you get a lot more confidence in those type definitions over some community-generated one. And your compiler options allow you to have multiple different types of settings. Like if you don't like, if you don't like having your type system yelling at you constantly, you can have optional, not have type coverage on your entire system, which is fine. You can progressively upgrade, or you can just go in with TypeScript as a decision at the very beginning, and then try to achieve 100% type coverage. Why Webpack? Webpack is really good. Front-end build system. You can throw whatever files, types at it, and then come up with a minified, runnable disk artifact. And I mean, that's just always, it's pretty handy. Upgrading it is just adding a new plugin and having it know how to convert that into some dist thing. I figured out a configuration that allows it to work pretty well with Phaser. And it works pretty well with legacy JS modules is what I put there. But back whenever it was popular in JavaScript to throw something on the global window object and then install a script underneath that to bind more functionality to that, Webpack can allow you to pull in those files and then work in the current paradigm that we have, which is exposed through ECMAScripts and blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. So why Phaser? I really like Phaser. It allows you to quickly put together 2D video games. It's modeled after how games were built in the Flash days. It's object-oriented. I don't know. It's good. Whatever. So right now, actually, to go over some notes about Phaser. Version 2 is currently being maintained by the community, which is kind of cool because it frees up the author to then create a version 3 that he's working through right now. And it's going to have a lot more goodness and be even more capable of working with modern JavaScript ecosystems. Yeah, okay, cool. So let's talk about video games. Let's see some video games, right? If you go to the Meetup site, there should be 2 links there. One link is to the code, so if you want to check out this project and be able to run this, then you can check it out. And there's also a GitHub Pages link so that you can check out the game from there. So, this is just a basic front-end website hosted through Git Pages, as I stated. It's really easy to throw that up, so that's why I chose that technology. But we have 2 links up here. One, a basic game, just to describe stuff. And then 2, the more polished moon shooter game. So, right. We got a little video game, we got a guy walking around, and it looks like you can interact with people and make the screen shake. Yeah, but this actually shows quite a bit of aspects of Phaser. As you'll see in the background, there's numbers, you're moving around a basic screen and having a camera follow you. There's some basic physics going on here. There's coordinates, and you can very easily just, do stuff that we normally do in a front-end type of thing. So if you want to console log statements, you can on some particular interactions. But that brings us to our next topic, which is, how do you easily generate multiple different colored art assets that will do some basic thing, animating a sprite, which is why I brought some props. So one of the things that I've experienced while building video games over time has been hitting a roadblock where you can't find the right asset that describes what you're trying to achieve in the video game. So I found that instead of searching online for those art assets or ripping them from a video game, because that kind of is a relatively high level of technical expertise to get some basic stuff. I found these really cheap model kits that are highly flexible, and you can pose them and put a camera around them pretty easily to, if you're making an RTS game, you can have a top-down view or a Diablo. Or if you want to have a basic 2D side-scroller shooter, it's really easy to pose these guys, take a picture, and then sprite animations can be anywhere from 2 to however many frames of animation to create some pretty interesting complex movement. This particular animation is, I think, 11 or 12 frames, but at that point you're doing stop motion to capture some basic art assets. One of the other things that I did to help generate these is get a green screen, so that whenever you do take it into Photoshop and you're trying to eliminate all the cruft, it's relatively easy to just select that, remove green screen, and then at that point you just have to remove the stand that is holding up the mech. And yeah, here's the mech. And then, whenever you're doing a very basic animation, it's very easy to just take one frame, move it slightly. I mean, once you get the picture, like the information of how it was posed and positioned doesn't really matter. So you can do like slight tweaks whenever you're trying to get a walking type animation. Yeah, that's enough of that. Here's another prop. Kind of feel like Carrot Top, but whatever. So Wacom tablet. It has a stylus that just makes it really easy to select the parts of the picture that you don't want in there and then remove it. We used Adobe Creative Cloud for a lot of those aspects of the project. And let's jump into some code. Now that we've talked about assets, and are there any questions about that tactic or?
What kind of camera did you say you used to?
So the camera system that I use is actually back there. So I just literally got a tripod from Amazon, which was only I think 11 or 20 bucks or something. And then you can use it with a camera. I have that strapped to a battery just so that I don't have to worry about the camera or the phone dying. But yeah, that allows you to just get a stable, consistent picture. So the only variable is just the stop motion animation that you're currently doing. Good question. Anyone else?
How many frames did you take it?
I think it's 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, let me.
It's 11 because the 12th is the first frame. That's how you make it loop.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, it might be better to do some. Yeah. So here's an example of what that raw picture would look like. Just green screen, and then you have a pose for a mech.
And just at a high, go ahead.
Yeah, what was the question?
So just at a high overview, did you take those images, put them in Photoshop, crop out the green screen, and then just create the sprite sheets in Photoshop, or did you take the images to a different program?
So once we have the images that no longer have the green screen in them, I can use, right now I'm using an online packager so that I can create sprite sheets from that. It will go in and position them and give you information about where the individual frames are in the extremely long image. But eventually I'd like to automate that so that I can just look at a directory and say, okay, if you see a sequence of something that starts with 0 or 1 and then ends in whatever number, just combine those.
Okay.
Not there yet. And then, okay, so that's the output. And then I think that I have a spreadsheet somewhere. All right, maybe I do. Well, it's definitely in source code, so we can see it there. This is not what I want to show. Yeah, and then here's the more interesting game. So this is kind of putting together all of what we saw in that previous game. It's a 2D side-scrolling shooter. You have 10 health. There are power-ups. I used a number of different model kits, and yeah. Still definitely a work in progress, but one of the cool things is it was designed with mobile in mind. So if you pulled out your phone and went to this publicly available URL, you can check out how to play the game there. And so yeah, I'm actually played this a lot, so pretty good. Yeah. Let me transition over to my personal laptop, and then we can jump into the code, and I can describe some basic stuff behind the Moon Shooter video game, and then I'm sure that'll clear up some questions that you could potentially have if you choose Phaser as the HTML5 video game framework that you'd like to use. Any questions so far? All right, cool. Sweet. Action. Okay, so first let me just tell you sort of how to get this up and running on your device if you'd like to. So here's a part where if you want to follow along, type in the commands. So assuming that you have the repo cloned somewhere on your file system, you need to install some node dependencies in a very particular folder. This isn't architected how you would normally expect. So I actually have. Right, because it's literally opening everything. So just high level, I have a provisioning over here, docs, source, and that's failing. All right, cool. Let's go here and just go traditional. So this is going to be like my opinion on what a monolithic microservice repository could look like. So using a number of different things. I have the source code and the provisioning scripts all divided out into separate folders. The particular folder that you'd be after is the source web static directory. And then at that point, it should kind of look like more of a traditional node application because you can run npm install on package.json. And I'm using a node version that's greater than 8, so I have npm version above 5 that I can use as package block file. After you run npm install, and you might have to run bower install too, then you can run npm start and then see what the application looks like. So that's high level. Let's go ahead and execute on that. So because I killed that guy. Change directory, source, web, static. And then because I have everything installed, I can just obviously run npm run and then have this happen. Nice. Or npm start, my bad. Duh. Cool, so this is just using Webpack dev server to host something on port 3000, and now we can go look at it and see the application. Its bundle is prepared, locally developed in your browser. So this is a view that I see whenever I'm doing development. Yeah, after you get to this point, you're basically good to go, right? Because you can jump into the source and check things out. Yeah, so like I showed you before, here's a moon shooter. If you need any help or have any questions with like how to run this, let me know. Just shout them out. It's cool. And then if you want to follow along, awesome. But one of the things that I don't have right now is a game over screen, and you'll see that whenever the game ends, there's just a black screen, and the user has to know, hey, if you click or enter space, then it's going to restart. So I will potentially show you how to add a text character, and yeah. But first, let's get oriented with the code. So like I said, this is a pretty standard Node app structure in your directory, or in the directory GitHub. So you have node modules, you have a disk folder. This is where everything gets bundled together. Interestingly enough, there's a Bower components directory. Has anyone used Bower in here before? I know you have.
Yes.
Yes, nice. There's actually a very particular reason. Some of the plugins that have been developed for Phaser still exist in the Bower ecosystem. And even though Bower said, hey, we're deprecating everything, they still host the files, and they have not been migrated over to npm. So, it's always good to grab those things and use node modules to install all of your dev dependencies. There's a types directory, but that's mostly to pull in any type definitions that have not been migrated over to definitely typed. And that's, like I said, the maintainer of the plugin is no longer really maintaining it. So it exists in TypeScript 1.0, but not really in the new version of TypeScript or blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's look at the source directory because that's kind of where the interesting tree is. You'll see here that I have a very basic React Redux application going on here. That's mostly just to use React Bootstrap, throw something together very quickly that looks nice, and not really have to worry about like more of the website until I get to that. So you know the React Redux React ecosystem. We have routers from React Router, reducers, containers, constants, and actions. But the more important folder for this talk is going to be the classes directory, because that's where the source code behind each of these two games is located. In there, you're going to see a relatively basic phaser application with several different concepts, your assets, which are everything that you need to run the game. And that reminded me, I'd like to pull up the spreadsheet for what do we call them? Debug grid. Yeah. Oh, no way. Really? Yeah, I guess each of these is separate. One second. I'm just going to pull that up real quick. Cool, and this is just the sprite sheet. This is put together using an online thing. You put in a bunch of images, and it'll just output a sprite sheet for you, either vertically, horizontally, or however you want. Right, back to the code. Because the Moonshooter has the most well-polished related concepts, so you'll have your assets where literally everything in your game, image-wise, is pulled in. You have your prefabs, which are what conceptually you think of as like entities inside of a video game. So that's players, enemies, power-ups, health bars, number boxes, states. So like you need to preload a lot of your assets whenever you are publishing an HTML5 video game. So there are a number of different states that the game goes through to get a certain level of guarantees, basically to load your images. You can throw a start screen on here, have the actual game over, and then the most critical file to a phaser video game is this, like I call it kind of the air traffic controller component. This is where you add up all the states into a phaser game. There's an instance of phaser here, and then you say, okay, I want to start boot. And this is just like a state machine, a Turing state machine. So only one state can be on at any given time, and you can transition between any state as you want. And each state has code that it runs. So let's just go through, you got a boot state. Quickly just preview what goes on. I show a loading bar, which again you can see here in this assets. Yeah. So that displays for a brief second. Once that is done, whatever, the state transitions over to the preload state. That's where a lot of the images are being loaded in. So for each image that I have in that directory, I basically have a new line that says, associate this like key with this particular image, and whenever I use that key, obviously it references the image, but inside of the phaser ecosystem. And kind of like React, phaser has a number of lifecycle methods that get executed. So this create function, obviously, whenever this class gets created, it'll run this block of code, and that's just like React's component will mount, component did mount. It has an update function, which is similar to React's render. This is actually kind of no surprise since React was built upon the principles of Doom. And then, yeah, I have here just a custom function that I'm executing to change something. And that's outside of the lifecycle methods. So eventually, you start the game. And then the game is, what it does here is just instantiates a number of those prefabs that were described before, the directory, builds the game world, sets the player where they need to be, and then it'll run through your update code. This is where most of the complexity is going to be whenever you build your own games. So basically, update functions are responsible for collision detections, what to do when whatever happens, etc. So, like for example, for the moon shooter, you put a player on the world map and then, or the game level, and then instantiate a bunch of enemies that randomly, spawn anywhere from or on the right side of the screen, and then your player starts on the left. And then obviously, like if your player hits the enemy or the enemy bullet hits the player, you deduct health. Very simple game, 10 health. Yeah, and then I also have some descriptions of what happens whenever a player overlaps with a power-up. So, this is kind of what it'd look like, potentially if you're in process of solidifying some logic, so you just want to throw something on there real quick. You can definitely use, all the ECMAScript hackery that you've learned up until this point, along with TypeScript to get some guarantees. So at this time, I'd just like to describe why adding TypeScript to your project is pretty cool. It allows you not to have to know very much about an API, and you can just kind of bump around like you normally would in a statically typed language and see what's available. Knowing that these are functions that can be executed is mostly half the battle whenever you're doing JavaScript development. So I don't know, this is a pretty big win. And if I need to investigate further, I can jump into the Phaser documentation and do so. All right, cool. So at this point, I just fed you guys a lot of information. So are there any questions? Are people running this locally on their system, or I don't know? All right, cool.
I've got a question.
What's up?
How long would you say it took you to just create this prototype so far?
I would say raw time actually putting this together, it would probably be somewhere in the 1 or 2 days, but obviously wrapping around that time is a lot of doing research, reading documentation, finding what's there or out there on the internet via tutorials, kind of refining a lot of the thought process, and then throwing that 2 days worth of work together. Good question.
You mentioned if you choose Phaser as your game framework, what's the other competitors? I've never heard of
I would say Unity is a very popular web framework that exists out there. If you're doing 3D stuff, I probably wouldn't recommend that you use Phaser because it's mostly its forte is 2D games like retro.
Okay.
But yeah, and then there are a number of other frameworks out there that I'm spacing out on. Yeah.
Just a comment. I think Unreal Engine might work as well, especially the fourth iteration.
Can you run that without you can run that with Asm.
Asm, yeah.
I've heard of both of those, obviously, but yeah, I had no idea you could do them browser-based, like a Phaser kind of thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think for some of the libraries that you choose, you might have to install plugins, Silverlight, but
no Silverlight.
Yeah. All right. Sweet. Let's see where to go next. Yeah, let's make a modification. So, like I said, I have a problem. I don't really display anything for the user whenever it's the game over screen. So let's just throw some text on there, make it say game over, and then click or tap to continue. And then at that point, you could throw it, live, yeah, and watch it on the public internet. Cool. So just to, because I know this, I threw this text object before on the simple game, so I don't really want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm just going to go over to where this is located in some state, just copy that, and then go from there. So let's go ahead and do that. If you have any questions, just go ahead and shout them out. And yeah. So we got here in the create function, which again, lifecycle method of phaser. Because this particular class extends a phaser state, that allows it to have guarantees that these functions are going to be called. Once again, because I'm using TypeScript, I can just look at this if I want to get a high-level view without having to do dot notation, and kind of see what sort of entities are related to the particular class that I'm looking at. So for that text object, I can see that I have quite a few things. This text sprite is just a variable thrown on this class. It's private, so nothing else can get it. I can see that that is being used to store what looks like a phaser type, or phaser text type. Let's see here. Yeah, so text is a function, takes all of these arguments, number, string. I don't really know what a phaser group is, small white lie, but here I can see the signature, or I don't really have to care what phaser group is, and I can see the signature is returning me this phaser text object. So I can either bump into there, look at it, or I can use that information to understand that what I'm saying here is this class expects some phaser text to be stored in this variable. So copy that over, and basically delete everything, because I don't need it. Game over screen, let's just do this same setup. So you see that I have an error. That's because I have my TypeScript compiler to yell at me every time I use an unused variable. At this point, you can see that my angry compiler is not letting you move forward in your code. So you definitely have to know what you're doing. I don't like lingering variables. But yeah, now we can use this to first describe create method, then use it to store a phaser text object. Obviously, I don't really have enough here, so let's just copy more code and alter it as we see fit. So text sprite, yep, it's a duplicate because I already have that. And why is this important?
I think you need to import text from phaser.
Yeah, yep, good catch. Nice. All right, sweet. So just to describe a couple different things, you can see that this text is requiring, an X position, a Y position, text, style if you want, and then a phaser group if you want. I'm not going to add it to a group. I'm just going to use a style, and I'm going to see what this looks like. You can see that this game over function also has an update method that's basically listening for user input to start the game over. But since I don't want this to take a super long time, I'm just going to go into that air traffic control, the start of the state machine, and make it state game over whenever it reloads. So hey, look, I see text and it's red and it looks exactly like simple game. So let's make some modifications there. So what I want to say is, hey, sorry bro, game over. Whoa, that's awesome. So ta-da, now it says game over, and it looks like I need another text object. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, I don't really think that I need to update this, so I can just get rid of the reference. And since I don't really care about having that there, let's improve the code ever so slightly. So now I can say, this is X position, this is Y position. Let's assume that it's going to take up a lot of space since it's using the same style. Please click or tap to restart game. There we go. That's pretty instructive. Nice. So that looks pretty awful. Let's just change that.
Maybe like 85.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to migrate it a little bit. Ooh, that's a little too far.
I don't play that game.
All right, cool. Is this responsive? Well, I mean, no, but yeah, let's fix that by reducing the amount of text. Click or tap to start. I think people kind of understand that instruction, that it applies to the context of the video game, and I don't really care about being polite, so there we go. That looks better. So on here, you can't really see it, so let's, I wonder if we can do like new looking characters. There we go.
It's all being rendered through Canvas, right?
Yeah, it does do new lines. Sorry, wait, yeah. Okay, fantastic question. I did not show you the container at all. And I just want to have a TS lint rule that basically says whenever you have a parameter on a new line, you have to new line all the things. I don't know, whatever, it's consistent. But yeah, okay, so fantastic question. Here is my container for Moonshooter. You can see that it has a very basic thing. It renders out, a div. So it isn't a canvas, it's just a div that you give reference to phaser. Okay, well, that was kind of like interestingly assembled English. Okay, so we have a div tag over here. It has an ID. That ID is defined up here because I'm going to use it multiple times. I just threw it on the class just because, whatever. So then you'll see that I use React tools, React DOM, find DOM node. At that point, I do some computing of width and height so that I can target like responsive experiences. And then I start a game of new Moonshooter. I pass it the canvas DOM element, the height and the width that I computed. And I also say, should the component update? And I say return false so that whenever React detects a change, it doesn't, re-render this particular DOM element. Yeah. The reason is because Phaser is obviously using that, and it doesn't necessarily know about React updates, so you obviously want to turn it off. Okay, cool. So let's check on this. I mean, that looks pretty good. Something that I'd like to have is aligning these text objects more intelligently. I have found some libraries in Phaser ecosystem that allows you to do that. So at this point, I'm not really going to concern myself with making those calculations, although that would be relatively easy. You have this.game.width, this.game.height, but I don't know. This is good enough. So let's publish this. But first, we have to go back to the air traffic controller guy and undo that change so that whenever the game loads, it actually loads or goes through the cycle that loads up all the images. Like, I don't know if you noticed this, but whenever it's on the game over screen, and there's logic in the game over screen to load the game state, it has this like gnarly green sort of stuff. It's because I never loaded up the images with Phaser, so it has no idea, what any of these keys are. So it just renders like a default sort of
Like a null
this
texture.
stuff. Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I mean, right? You can like play it like this. Here's my main character. It looks like the text area, so you can kind of figure out like how many dudes you've killed. You just have no idea. Like, here, let's die. Yeah, see? All right. Anyways, let's do this back to boot. Let's see if I have any errors. It looks like I don't. I do have some warnings, but I mean, don't we all? So let's see what my differences are. Interesting. Well, I mean, I guess it's technically sneaking in. I don't really want that. So reset this guy. And then, yeah, here you can see all the changes that we made in the presentation. We added some text characters to the game over screen. So that looks fine. Git, commit, and text. Okay, so now I need to figure out what my scripts are. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I didn't put the JSON. There we go. So we do kind of have a flow here. I usually run npm test, compile dist, serve dist, just to serve this through another type of server other than Webpacks. It just gives me another level of guarantee. So let's go ahead and do that. npm run compile this and npm run serve dist. And then I have this function called, or rather node script called deploy dist. Literally all that does is it copies over the Webpack artifact. Sorry. The Webpack dist artifacts and then copies them over to a particular folder that Git Pages is looking at to serve your static site. Cool. So let's see where this is at. This takes a little bit because it's running in like production mode, so it's minifying everything. It's doing all of that goodness, that hotness, turning your source code into the like smallest amount of files it can do realistically. Yeah. So just to show you what those files look like. You'll see here we have an HTML page. It has Google Analytics on it. It has the bundle, which is a combination of your source code and any libraries that you added in to make this happen. Everything's all plumbed together in that the one script that your actual website needs is being referenced. There's also all these assets that got collapsed down into a single spot. You'll see that it has this like hash associated with it in its file name. That's for stuff that I can't think of right now. Whatever. We have fonts. We have everything that our entire site needs. So let's go check it out now on localhost 8080, I believe it is, and you'll see like a basic Express server serving the dist artifacts, just so that I can make sure that any assumptions that I had in my Webpack ecosystem doesn't like leak out into like the dist artifacts. Again, just another level of guarantee. And after I've done that, I feel pretty safe to run npm run deploy dist. And then at this point, it's just going to run through a very basic bash collection of commands, remove the current docs directory, and then copy recursively the dist folder into that directory. So, I don't know. Now you'll see we have a lot of different changes. Each of the images who had their hash values change, obviously it's showing up. And whenever I add this, I can then commit, publish game over, let's say, latest game over screen. And then with a simple git push, I can go back to the website URL, which is something Carpe Noctem, and check out the changes. Typically it takes about like 1 to 5 minutes, I'd say, before the changes actually take effect. So if we get to the game over screen and see nothing, don't be alarmed. We'll just refresh a couple times. But at this point, does anyone have any questions about like distributing the artifacts onto a Git page, GitHub pages type system? Yeah, see. Perfect. Okay, well, that concludes this talk. Just to sum up, I talked about my particular opinion on what an HTML5 video game should look like, including Webpack, TypeScript, and Phaser. I dived into the guts of what makes up a Phaser video game. I described my React Redux application very briefly, just to kind of show you this is how you plug it into Phaser. And I also showed you how to take the Webpack compiled artifacts and then publish them onto a GitHub page, which if you're not aware, it's just a really easy site. And because of all of that, we can see what the actual end video game would look like on the internet. And yeah, that's it. So at this point, does anyone have any lingering questions? If not, yeah.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah, perfect.
So, forgive me if I don't ask this the right way. So how does Phaser handle memory management? So you have like the different scenes, like start scene, the game scene, you can have like upgrade scene, like all these different scenes. When you switch from start scene to the game scene, does it clean up the start scene or does it keep it in the memory? And how does that handle as the game continues?
Okay, here's the thing. As long as it's defined in this air traffic controller class, I highly doubt that Phaser is just going to drop that state as a reference. But to be clear, I don't really know.
Okay.
I'd have to read through the source code in order to figure that one out.
Okay.
However, I imagine, because this is at the end of the day JavaScript, and if you're using a class that is then using some other variables, those things are not going to be eligible for garbage collection. So I doubt that anything's going to happen to anything that is running currently in your video game. I don't know if they have any optimizations, if they can detect that you will never go back to that state that has been registered, then never use it again. But like I said, I have no idea.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So how does Phaser compare to other platforms in popularity? So we mentioned Unreal, Unity. I think Unity can do 2D and 3D as well, I think. Yeah. And
yeah.
As far as is it a top 5, top 10, top 50?
I would say that it's something that's known in the community. There's a lot of forum chatter online that I found. There's a number of tutorials that you can look up, see what kind of different video games people are talking about. If you go to GitHub, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of references to Phaser video games that people have written over time. So I don't know. Maybe that's a safe term. So I'm sure you are going
7 million commits.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't want to show it up for code. Let's select something that would be very Phaser specific, like this. Oh.
I guess it really depends on your end product as well.
It's probably because of the VPN. It doesn't like this. All right. Let's connect from Texas. I mean, it triggers stuff sometimes.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because I currently use Chrome SDK as a platform to build apps in, and I want to switch to something else because I'm worried about the future of their product, and I'm just looking at other stuff and seeing what I should invest my time into, sit down and learn and really just like get in there and know everything about it.
Like for a first time video game, I mean, it doesn't really matter what framework necessarily you choose because the same underlying core concepts are going to be applied no matter what the language or framework is.
Sure.
So, like if you're just putting together like small test games to try to figure out something, I do kind of like Phaser, for throwing together those rough sketches. But like I said earlier, it doesn't really fit well into like a 3D context. I think that you would find the community is there for Phaser, and that you can find some stuff out there that already exists. But if you're trying to future-proof, your decision, I mean, you can go with any of the other popular frameworks too. If you want to like pivot into 3D, Unity is kind of where I'd go personally. But like I said, I mean, if you're just like learning the basics of putting together a video game, it will definitely do. One thing that Phaser does have over like Unity or something is you don't have to install a plugin in order to like get the game running. And if you design your video game where like anybody can like instantly access it without having to worry about like a barrier of entry, then I don't know, there's a lot of potential there. And that's kind of why I chose it. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of the information dump of what I know.
Sure. So last question, do you know anything about version 3, like when that's going to come out, or if there's any breaking changes? And
Yeah,
if you don't know, that's fine too.
Like a nightly build going on for like Phaser 3. I wonder if it's already here. So yeah, in the Phaser repository, it looks like there's a version 2 and there's a version 3. Latest commit 2 hours ago, so something that's being worked on. And yeah, you can just check out this guy's commits and see what he's been adding. You can see based on the amount of stars too, like this is one of the more well-known HTML5 frameworks. I'm sure if you typed in like awesome HTML5 framework, it might be no.
There's also, what was it, Pixely.js?
Yeah.
It's another framework.
Yeah. This. Let's see if it's on here. Oh man, it might be a few amount of words. Okay, whatever. I'll leave you with
okay, sure.
our research projects for you to do at home. Homework.
Cool.
Anyone else have any questions? Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming to this month's Node Indy. Like I said, we're going to make some modifications to scheduling, so be on the lookout for that. Keep some of the things on your radar, Node bots, other lectures. Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys.